This is going to be my last video of just talking about general topics of critical reasoning. Last year I did a video which was about how to read something or read a magazine or an article and extract arguments from it via conclusion words and premise words. And then kind of recently I did a video talking about about what deductive, inductive, and abductive reasonings are, and then I'm going to end this little series, which has taken a very long time because I don't think about this that much. I'm going to kind of end this by talking about 10 general fallacies which you would typically learn about in if you were to take a critical reasoning class. These 3 videos which I've done are pretty much like general things you would learn if you took a class which is called either reasoning or critical reasoning. So I'm going to just kind of talk about 10 fallacies which you don't want to include in an argument that you are making, no matter what you're really talking about. So, what is a fallacy? First off, a fallacy is an error of reasoning. It is something that if you were to include one of these things into your argument, one could say, "Hey, that's it. That is an error of reasoning, and thus your argument doesn't really work." And there are debates, in more complex, issues of philosophy as to whether some of these are actual fallacies or not. Most of them definitely are, but there are a couple in here that I've picked out that might not entirely always be, and I'll explain that as we go along. So, pretty much, most of these have to do with just if you were to include this into your argument, somebody could say, "Hey, that's the fallacy of blah blah." Now, there are tons and tons of fallacies. There are a lot, so I couldn't possibly talk about all of them, but I picked out 10 which I think are pretty important. So, starting the very first one, which is the fallacy of circularity or circular reasoning, which is saying that you can't begin a argument with a certain premise and end with that premise also. You can't argue something while having a certain statement be your premise, or one of your premises, and also your conclusion. So see how it goes in a circle, how it is circular reasoning. Now, sometimes people think that the epistemic theory of coherentism commits this, and that is not that is a wrong way of going about epistemic justification. That's a different matter. The second one, which is called ad hominem. Now, there are various kinds of this, and this is a form of the red herring fallacy. Now, that's a fallacy I didn't entirely include because it comes in many forms. Red herring is when you are arguing with somebody, like not quarreling, but you have distinct arguments that you are making, and you change the subject. You change the subject from one issue of discussion or argument to something entirely different. So ad hominem is personal insults or personal attacks on your opponent when you are arguing. So, if you are trying to argue with a dualist that monism is the correct philosophy of mind, and you say, well, monists are stupid and you are stupid, or monists don't have the right mindset, or there's something bad about them, or you're insulting your opponent, that doesn't help your argument at all, and it's a fallacy. And there's also different kinds of that, like circumstantial ad hominem and such. The third one is a big one, slippery slope. It's kind of like when it's like that when something happens and something else happens. So let's say a kid is playing Grand Theft Auto 5. Okay, he was playing that game, and then he goes and kills someone with a machine gun. People think that video games are the cause of murder. There are people who actually think this, because it's a slippery slope in that just because he plays just because he plays GTA 5 doesn't mean that he will kill people, or just because he played that game doesn't mean that the game caused him to do this, or just because a certain person is just if a certain person talks about violence doesn't mean he will do it. It's just like you go from one premise to a conclusion without having a way of connecting them. Because if you say that if someone plays GTA 5, then he will kill people, you don't have a middle ground as to how you justify as to how someone playing GTA 5 will make him kill people. And people think, and people are the government bans certain things of entertainment, or does certain things because one thing happens, and people have this attitude that if this thing happens, then all this stuff will happen. And there are many other examples that I could possibly talk about. Straw man. It's called straw man because, let's say you are arguing towards an Iron Man, and you focus your attention on a straw man, which the man is like, say, a argument which can easily be destroyed. So you turn your attention from something that you cannot defeat to something that you can. So it's like that if you are arguing between dualism and monism in the philosophy of mind, and you cannot really, if you are a dualist and you can't really destroy the other person's argument or defeat him in his argument, because there's lots of issues that cannot really be dismissed quite so easily, you change your focus on something that is lesser or which is possibly easier to be defeated, or a lesser issue or a non-issue. So let's say a certain person has let's say A has a position X, and then A's opponent B attacks X prime, or X sub 2, which is a distorted version or a messed up version or something else entirely. But straw man is mostly directed towards, refuting things or defeating arguments which are not entirely what the person was saying, or what the person was arguing. Okay, 5 is begging the question, which is kind of a more difficult one, but it's that if you are trying to argue your conclusion from your premises, there isn't really good reasons. Like if you have premises 1 and 2, and then you have your conclusion, you are arguing this argument, and somebody could say that your argument begs the question by saying that your premises don't necessarily infer to the conclusion, or your conclusion doesn't really follow from the premises that you stated. So this is sometimes thought of as related to the circularity fallacy, and there's very many ways of doing, or ways that the begging question can manifest itself into various different kinds of fallacies. But it's saying that the certain argument is asking you to accept or believe a certain proposition, but there's no good evidence or reasons for believing that given the argument. So it's just that it's not quite a red herring or a straw man, but it's just saying that if you have your premises in your conclusion, there's not quite there's not it doesn't necessarily, to infer the conclusion doesn't necessarily come from the premises, or there's a gap in reasoning somewhere. So on to 6, the fallacy of composition. This is a very debated one. Some people who do the philosophy of metaphysics do not agree with this, but it's this is kind of the thing that if we have parts x, y, and z of the set X, that the parts x, y, and z and all of their properties make up the properties and characteristics of the set X. It's just stating that the parts make up the whole without really having a reason for saying that, and that just because, and that it's kind of just like granting that the parts make up the whole without really giving a reason as to why that is the case. Let's say that a part of the set X has a characteristic. Doesn't mean that the whole entire thing has that characteristic. Now that, I think that does kind of work, but there are metaphysics of part and whole relations which do debate that, and then there are mathematicians and logicians of set theory who say that what a set is all of its parts, is what it is. So that's kind of a debated one, but people who disagree with it have reasons for it. So there you go. A loaded question is the fallacy of the loaded question is, or the many questions. The question, asking a question or giving a premise that has a lot of loaded words in it or loaded things in it, which leads to a multiplicity of other questions, to where you really can't get anywhere in your argument because of how loaded those things are. It either leads to many other questions, or it doesn't, or the certain word or sentence doesn't have reasons for why that is the case, or it's controversial and it just leads to many other things, and you can't really get anywhere with this kind of reasoning. Hasty generalization. Now that's when you have a very small sample. Let's say you're doing statistical work and you are trying to say that, say that 90% of people who live on Hickory Street in Omaha, Nebraska drink beer, or you have a very small sample of people that you are trying to take big generalizations from, or you have a certain sample and you have like the example I heard is that my friend says that her class is hard in horticulture. I say that my class is hard in horticulture, therefore all classes of horticulture are difficult. That's only two people who say that the horticulture classes are difficult, and that is not enough to make the big generalization that all horticulture classes are difficult. So it's just having a very small sample, which the people who do this fallacy wrongly do it by inferring huge things from this very small thing, from this very small sample group. Okay, the post hoc fallacy. If we have a event A, which leads to and then we have event B after that, it is not necessarily the case that A caused B just because A came before B. The appeal to authority. It's like saying that. Well, it's like saying that Tiger Woods says such and such about so and so. Therefore, you should believe it too. You should think it too. And they would use the influence and the respect and the authority of a certain name like Tiger Woods among golf, or even a dictator of a nation, or Michael Jordan, or somebody who is authoritative in a certain group or authoritative somewhere else. It's somebody that is revered, authoritative, and respected. People that will take that, they will take the influence of a certain name and use that to help their argument. Okay, so all of these fallacies that I've mentioned here all just pose they create a gap in reasoning, and they infer things without having real reasons for inferring them, and there isn't entire connections in their process or chain of reasonings, or they infer things that that there's no way that their premises could lead to that, or it's changing the subject, or arguing in a circle, that whole kind of thing. So the whole thing is just that when you are arguing things, no matter what class you're taking, or no matter what you have a PhD in, or no matter what you are writing a article about, you have to make sure that there are no gaps in your reasoning. And if you make a argument, make sure that your conclusion follows from your premises, and none of these fallacies, among there are probably 10 others that you might learn in a critical reasoning class. Make sure that you aren't committing those, and especially if you are in a argumentation and debate class, that you aren't doing that if you are arguing with a certain other member of your class. It's that class. I don't know what all universities have that, but that is a good class, and I think it's better than speech. But anyway, if you have any questions, or this is pretty easy stuff. So if you do have a question or need help with something, then please comment below, or if you think that I've left something out, or messed one of these fallacies up, please tell me, and I'd love to hear from you. So thank you.